This is something I found something interesting that we found over the last sort of couple of years of doing this now, 18 months or so, is that, do people always have the cameras off? Are the microphones always muted? And what we want to try and do is create engagement and human connection. And one of the big problems that we find is that these human connections can be easily lost. You lose layers of fidelity of what people are actually talking to you about. And maybe that's partly because of the fact that we connect better to each other when we're in person. We put ourselves behind a camera, and if suddenly we lose things like intent, we lose things like maybe how we're talking about things, whether we're distracted, whether we're engaged. It's hard. You lose the camera, we lose even further. Like, are they even there? Like, we don't even know. And again, thank you, Veronica, for putting your camera on so I can see you there. It's good. And I suppose the other thing as well here is that our microphones are always muted. Well, of course, in big sessions when we've got lots of people talking, yeah, we should have the mute, I suppose, to keep the background noise away, but let's try and engage people. The regular temperature checks are important, I found. Are people engaged? Are people happy? Fist of 5, thumbs up on the kind of emojis, what have you. The bigger, most important thing as well is being present. And we'll talk a little bit more about that shortly, but being present is difficult because you've got to feel like you're almost hyper available and hyper visible. And so an email will go over here when you're on a call and you'll be answering that email. And then another thing will pop up on Slack and you'll be over here doing on Slack. But I think being present in the real world is relatively straightforward. You're in the room. It's easy to maintain connectivity with each other in the room because you're present. You're physically present. Actually, it's really easy to get distracted by everything else that's going on out there. And so it's important to keep presence in there. I've got an app on my MacBook called Haze Over, which basically focuses on the one window that I'm looking at and literally hazes everything else over, puts an overlay over everything else. So I can't even see. It blurs it out effectively, and it maintains my presence, so I can look at one place and look at where we're actually working through, instead of going, oh, is that a notification over there? Because the presence is difficult. We're already losing so much data from it, from people being in the room. Actually, we may as well try and maintain presence as well. One thing I've seen here is important. I tend to prepare for my day ahead, dress as you'd like to be seen, create a daily backlog. I'm always for backlogs and post-it notes and everything everywhere. This is an important one that I think people forget. Manage your family expectations. I'm not available from this time to this time, but outside of that, I'm okay. If there's a note on the door, then that means I'm not available. Those kind of things, right? And synchronizing with your team is important. If you're using Scrum, the daily stand-up is always helpful. Often a daily sit-down now is in the online world, but it's helpful to connect with each other, maintain that human connection, but also try and make room for those work conversations. Like, how do you get coffee moments when you're working from home and you're constantly engaged and you're meant to be constantly online? It's hard to do that. But managing your time can be easier. Block out your calendar for breaks. I tend to, when coaching new teams, it's like, actually, when do you want to have those breaks? If you're constantly online all the way throughout the day, you're never going to have that time to think and to stretch and to hydrate. Like, every hour or so, put a time block in your diary to stop people booking meetings in. Create time boxes. Use the Pomodoro method if you can. 15-minute of activity or 25 minutes of activity and then 5-minute break. And do that throughout the day. It can be quite helpful because you can focus. Again, one of the kind of implications of this is that when we're working from home, there's a barrier of trust. And I think that the issue is that we try to almost overcommit and over produce. And so by doing that, we tend to multitask, trying to do multiple things at the same time. And we're rubbish at it. We're not evolved to actually multitask. We're very good at focused work, but when we multitask, we lose a huge amount of overhead by doing it. Like 30% of a task gets lost every time we switch to something else. We're very good at context switching. We can do it very quickly, but we lose time with that. We can't do things at the same time. So try and focus. Try and get one thing done. So, consider what you're doing with the team. I use a thing called Calendly, which is a really good online tool to manage my calendars. When people book time in my diaries, it basically says what times are available for people, so they can book time in. But I always make sure there's breaks in between every meeting as well, to allow me to write notes to kind of catch up. So these buffers are really important to meetings as well, because that's what you'd have in the real world. I mean, we're in the real world, but in the office, you'd have that time to walk back to your desk or to walk back to a thing or to have a coffee. You'd have that buffer time. we almost want to sort of see our calendars back to back to show that we're productive, and it's a false economy.